Thank you for joining me. My name is Kim Reynolds, formerly Kimani Divine. So happy to be here today. I am the Community Outreach and Training Specialist here at the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. I work as a part of the Families of Color program that started for COVID during COVID-19, and now we're in the midst of an endemic. But the challenges to mental health for our people of color community has not changed. We're still here in dialogue about how to maintain and bridge that gap. Today, we're going to be discussing engaging Asian Americans in mental health. We're going to go over the various ethnic groups that comprise the Asian American community, the cultural and systemic issues that are barriers to engaging them, and practical strategies for providers to use to help with engagement for the Asian American community. Just a little bit about our guest today. Maggie Luo is the Associate Director of Development and Communications with the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New Jersey, where she oversees the strategic statewide organizations for public awareness programming, community outreach, online presence, affiliate affairs, and development. Maggie has and she's very young looking, almost 20 years of experience in working with immigrant families affected by mental illness to cultivate grassroots awareness on mental health and planting community self-help groups across New Jersey. She's the founder and statewide coordinator for NAMI New Jersey's Chinese American Mental Health Outreach Program since 2003, and a subject matter expert for the NAMI on mental health advocacy in the Asian American community. So we welcome Maggie, and I'm going to introduce you or let my wonderful co-host, Faith, take it away.
Oh, you're welcome. So, thank you so much, Kimani. Thanks for that great introduction. And again, I'm really excited. You know, anyone who have been here before know I get really excited about my guests because there's so much a wealth of information that is shared here on this platform. So I really appreciate our guests taking time to be here, but also for you or who have tuned in to be able to be here and to share with us. And I really hope that when we have the question and answer portion of this opened up, that you'll be sharing or asking your questions so that we can get the most out of our time together. So without any further ado, because time goes so fast, we'll start. So Maggie, first, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Faith, and thank you so much, Kimani, for your kind introduction. Yeah, so lovely and honored to be here.
But I want to start out by asking, Kimani gave that wonderful bio of your background. How did you even start out in this field, right? Because that tells all the wonderful work that you have done, but you have been doing so many things with your life, but you chose working in this field.
Wow, thank you, Faith. That's really an inroad to introduce myself again, because I think that we have resumes, but I always love the people to pop out from the paper, right? And I thank you for that. So I am a first generation immigrant here. I just like Kimani said, that I did have 20 years of experience working with other immigrant families. So and when you said I chose this, I would say that rather I was chosen in some sense, because I'm a person of faith. And I think that when back in the time, 20 years ago, I have a family member who have experienced mental health issues. And at the time I was in master program and, learning about public health. And I went to a conference, it was, focused on mental health. And I was thinking to myself, I need to learn more about this, right? So that, and also with what I learned, maybe I can serve my fellow community members as well. So started from there. And I was put in the wonderful grassroots organization called NAMI. Really, it is not a top-down, it is a grassroots approach, which I truly felt that I was given a lot of channels and opportunity to serve from that angle. And so in the interim, I got served as well, and my family. And now I have a 15-year-old, a teenager who has he has his own mental health and developmental disabilities as well. So I can use and I can leverage what I learned to serve and to be the best mom that he could have.
Wow. Wow. 15. You look like you're 15. So so
Thank
awesome
you.
from sharing so much of your life with us. And you're right. Some of us, the work that we do, it's like we are chosen to do the work, So although sometimes we're like, no, I don't want to do this. But thank you for sharing that. So when we talk about Asian American community, often people, including myself, I'm admitting to that one, clump everyone under one umbrella. Like, we see just a broad picture. But based on speaking with you, I heard that, I learned that there were there are different groups under the umbrella of Asian America. So can you help us in terms of giving us a better view in terms of what that really looks like?
Yes, that's a very good and fair question. I love to unpack. So let me start from what the census says, right? So the census defined Asian American, which is 7.2% of the whole country's population, or 24 million. The census defines this group as Americans of Asian ancestry, with include both immigrants from specific regions in Asia and their descendants, right? So, and this group, the groups that fall under this category, I'm going to read a list here that includes Chinese, Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, Pakistani, Thai, Hmong, Cambodian, Laotian, Bangladeshi, Burmese, Nepalese, Indonesians, Sri Lankan, Malaysian, and Tibetan Americans. So bringing it home to New Jersey, to the Garden State here, we are the fourth largest state with Asian American population. And the latest, I looked it up, right now it's exceeding 1 million residents of Asian ancestry, and that is about 10% of our New Jersey population.
Wow.
So chances are, clinicians here on this platform have met clients in Asian American community. And I would say that Middlesex County, Bergen, and Hudson are the three counties that have the largest concentration of this group. And I wanted to also mention, because in the past decade, just 10 years, short 10 years, the number of New Jersey residents who identify themselves as Asian have increased by a whooping 44%, Faith. So only in 10 years, right? So the majority of those are of Indian heritage, followed by Chinese, Filipino, Korean, Pakistani, Vietnamese, and Japanese. So, and one thing to note is 2/3 of this community speak a language other than English at home. So the most common of these are Chinese, Hindi, Tagalog, and Vietnamese, right? So what I hope to emphasize here is that this label, this Asian American group, as an integral part of American cultural mosaic, really encompasses a wide range of diversity, and with 30 some ethnic groups speaking over 50 languages. So it is important to consider the from that lens, and also consider the immigration history of the family and levels of acculturation for each individual, which we can unpack a little later. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, whoa, that is a lot. There's a lot of individuals. My lines have changed in terms of when speaking about Asian Americans. You brought up some very interesting statistics, and thank you so much for doing that. So, as service providers, why is this so important for us to be even aware of this?
I think it definitely helps to for passionate providers, whom I believe are here listening. to have a more nuanced picture of the Asian American population whom they serve, whom you serve, right? And it is said that the Asian American community is the least understood and least studied or research community among the general population. If you look at policymakers and civic leaders, really this group is the least studied. And a lot of misconceptions and stereotypes of Asian American communities are very prevalent in mainstream media and culture as well, right? So, and it also in public schools, and certainly in healthcare systems and therapeutic settings. I always love to quote an advocacy group called the Jersey Promise, right? That they issued a report a few years ago. I love to quote them to say that after you saw the movie Crazy Rich Asians, right? You would never know that 26% of Asian American households in New Jersey live below what they call the ALICE threshold, right? The assets limited, income constrained, and employed threshold. And these people struggle day to day to survive, right? So it is very important for clinicians and on a macro level for leaders of healthcare systems to not lump all the Asian American clients into one category, but rather to treat each individual according to their own assets and circumstances without relying on stereotypes, right? So again, it is the overarching theme for this Engage series that you are hosting, and also the current dialogues in our society surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, that cultural humility is so important, is paramount in any human service setting. And I believe that the previous Engage speakers, such as our friends Parentab and Yvette, and Reverend, both all refer to this.
Right, exactly. And thank you so much for talking about the cultural humility, because that's such a key part in terms of engaging, because you just described that in the Asian American community, there are so many groups under that one umbrella. And in order for us to really serve individuals, we have to be able to understand and meet people where they're at, right? And so because they're from different groups have different cultures or different ways of actually doing things. So my question to you is, how as a service provider can I even start this journey of connecting? When I see someone who may be from a Asian American background, but I'm not sure, what group they're from. How do I even start that whole process?
Right. That's a wonderful question. I think that I'm here not to intimidate, to say that, well, it's impossible, right? I do want to empower and to just give that confidence because, because I would love to unpack this cultural and systemic barriers, right? And agree with you that even though there are a lot of the individual traits that we really need to focus on, there are commonalities that we can start to understand so that we can be informed enough to ask good questions, right? So, but I wanted to quote before that, I wanted to mention a small survey that I did just last year within my community, our network of individual with lived experience of mental illness, and they are all Asian / Chinese Americans. So I asked them, so what would you be looking for when you are seeking mental health treatment, specifically therapy, right? Talk therapy, right? For those who are receptive to this mode of treatment, it's very, very interesting that almost half of them reported that they do not really have any preference for their cultural background for their clinician. So it what really matters to them is whether or not this clinician would be willing and open enough for them to, or to give them that, that setting so that they feel comfortable sharing, and whatever that they share, the response would be just, more engaging and listening, so that, and the feeling of being respected. And we can talk more about that later, but I feel that that is such an important point to really to get it out there, because our clinicians are passionate, and you do want to make a difference in the lives of their clients. And for Asian American clients, it's not necessary for them to, you don't always need to refer out. Even though, I will share some resources later on how to look for, right, good referral information for clinicians. But I would say that at this time, if you are listening and you have, you might have a caseload with Asian American clients, definitely investigate, be curious about, what they gravitates to, what maybe they would, because some of the people that I survey, they even choose a therapist that who is not from their own culture. So, so we are talking very good footing here, that there is good, the research is supporting that that respect and good listening would really cross boundaries.
I love that. And again, that's so important for us to realize that, because as providers, sometimes we look for, oh, well, this person is Asian American, so we need to find an Asian American clinician, not realizing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is not many Asian American therapists to refer out to, right?
Absolutely.
So this is really good news that people, that's not a person, many people's priority as it pertains to what they look for when they're looking for a therapist. They want someone who can connect with them on a human level, who is respectful of them, who actually listen to what they're actually saying and being there to provide that support. So thank you so much for sharing that. There are certain barriers that sometimes prevent people from seeking service. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's important too.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, there are cultural barriers and also systemic barriers. So I'm going to start with the cultural part, right? So many of the cultural traditions with Asian American communities emphasize collectivist values, where people's the personal identity is defined by the relationship with other with their family members, with other community members, right? So the needs and the interests of the group would often take priority over the needs and wants of each person, right? And in that, I remember chatting with you that in that sense, I learned from Yvette, actually. They're saying that, well, actually, America, US is really a global minority in terms of valuing individualism, because the rest of the world, a lot of other cultures really emphasize the collectivist values, right? So, but then these traditions and practices can strongly influence individuals across generations, right? Regardless of how recently they have immigrated to this country or how thoroughly they have integrated to the mainstream culture here. And I want to mention that this shows up in different ways outside of home and immediate community. In a clinical setting, when you as a clinician share a room with an Asian American client, sometimes you have an increased possessional power perceived by the Asian client, which is often called the white coat effect, right? Which may prevent the client to share their deep down feelings or to raise questions to what you say. They may be thinking, who am I, right? I don't know anything, right? If this is a doctor, or a clinician in a white coat, even though you're not, they clothe you, right? So, but if that dynamic happens, it would be important for the clinicians to understand where that may come from, to go out of your way to validate them, right? That I am the expert of my own body, right? That I know what I'm feeling, and that the clinician here will have to use what I'm giving them to help me with my situation circumstances. But if I'm holding back and I am just listening one way and think that I don't have anything to offer, to bring to the table, then we're not going anywhere. We're not reaching any goals here, right? So as a clinician, you can do something to initiate that connection, to engage Asian clients. And another thing about the cultural, from the cultural perspective, the collectivist culture can create a burden of high expectations and family pressure, which can worsen or even cause mental health distress and conditions. And too often, people in our community will attempt to hide their symptoms until the absolute necessity, right? So that's why the help seeking rate is low, and whenever we seek help, it's already in a bad shape, right? People are in a bad shape. So, but they do all that really is to avoid the cultural shame and stigma, right? Which I believe is across the board. And also when I'm thinking about Asian families, there are clearly defined roles and expectations for different family members. For example, the concept of filial piety, right, expects children to pay deep respect to their elders or to their parents. Not all the youth could do that, right? But to live up to that expectation, children would often grow up with a strong focus on emotional self-control, loyalty, conforming to social norms, respect for authority, and also focus on academic achievement, right? So in some families, this interdependence or hierarchy, if you will, often means that any decision making, including the decision to seek healthcare, mental health care, is determined by the interest of the family as a whole. So you might see, I love the Parent Tab's talk about engaging families, because that comes in so important to Asian American families. And I would say that belonging to a family with strong bonds and close relationship, sometimes across generations, right? Because many generations live in the same household. Living in that family can be a significant source of personal strength, right? It could provide a very reliable support network and also compassion in its own way. But it can also be a source of significant distress and trauma when something disrupt or interrupt these bonds, whether by a family member breaking away from that shared traditions, or from a personal crisis, for example, mental health condition. So I would say that the pressure to uphold the family expectation can really manifest in various ways. I want to list some. It's maybe in your practice, you may see something that relates to it. Or the reason that I wanted to share all these is not to say that you as clinicians you need to learn everything, right? But it is really to be informed enough to know how to ask questions, like we said before. So the one way is that some youth may face a great amount of social stress or coming from family as well, from straddling two cultures, right? They attempt to balance the expectations of belonging to two different communities, right, at the same time. And the perfectionism or the traits would prevent them from failing, right?
Mhm.
So that is a tremendous source of stress. And in families with wide acculturation gaps, especially if they live together or close to each other or still maintain that close bonds, where you have recent immigrant parents or grandparents and the US born children, there may be intergenerational cultural conflict, you know. Now they even, it's an acronym, it's ICC, right? And when I was doing my research, I said, what is ICC? Oh, it's in intergenerational cultural conflict, which I witnessed so often, but now I have a name, right, to call. Then the gender norms as well, right? Gender norms and expectations that's tied to the cultural values can also cause significant distress. Women are often expected to provide care to younger siblings or elders, right? So that is the gender norms. And many Asian American individuals also struggle with the lasting impacts of trauma or stress experienced by their parents or earlier generations. For those who came to the US as refugees or asylees, it's especially from the areas with significant conflict experiences, violence, wars, or economic, political oppression. They can often experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And I would say that I chatted with Diana Chow, who was a very, very insightful and vocal leader in youth, right? That she mentioned something about when refugee children who never experienced the trauma firsthand can experience intergenerational trauma where they internalize their parents' psychological distress and shows up in physical ways, right? So that is some of the cultural considerations when you are seeing Asian American clients.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's thorough. I mean, the last point that you made is very, very interesting. That although the individual who may not have been traumatized, their family have had been traumatized in the past, it still impacts that young person today. And
Absolutely.
I'm just curious in terms of, you said it shows up in a physical ways. Can you just explain what you mean by that, and how does that show up? Just give an example.
It's really stress related, right? So they find themselves very susceptible to a certain type of stress. And when it's not until, and this is, I learned, you know, I try to be humble as well. I learned constantly that they're seeing that it's not until they chatted with their parents or get to know more about their earlier generations, what they experience. And, you know, in many cases in therapy, they were helped in making the connections to backtracking and to really identify some of the intergenerational sources for the trauma. So it really is the body aches or the heightened sensitivity to things. So I think that it's an area that needs more research into, because so far I have seen some research, but I would hope it is one thing about, and I want to next talk about systemic barriers, because I feel that the challenges in research really have put the Asian American communities in a disadvantaged place when we come to realize, oh, we see something, but we don't really understand that, right? But when we try to look into it, like through research, we run into this broad diversity of the community overall, than the relatively small population size of a specific cultural subgroup. So it's very challenging to get adequate samples, right, to look at or to so that we can generalize the needs of this population. And I would put this particular point under that, we really need to know more about that.
Right, because earlier when you started speaking, you said that it's a group that there's not a lot of research around, and you did mention that earlier. Time goes by when you're having fun, but I want you to talk a little bit about the systemic issues that impact engagement.
Yeah, so as I said, the language barriers I see it as a huge barrier. But when we talk about the systemic, I really wanted to mention the class standards, right? The culturally, linguistically appropriate services. So I'm very happy to hear that a lot of the federal grants are really out of the Title VI requirements, right? So it is in building more and more facilities with that standard. So that is something that we observe, but we have solution now. And then a stigma and shame that we talked about, right? One recent survey from SAMHSA, they're saying that Asian American are most likely to quote the reasons for not receiving mental health treatment. These three are: don't want others to find out, confidentiality concerns, right? Fear of neighbors' negative opinions. So these are really what's on their mind when they consider seeking treatment. So maybe as clinicians, it would be very important and useful to go out of your way to reiterate that they have confidentiality protection there, right? So because that was not offered in other Asian countries, so it's something that clinicians can bring to the table upfront. And also insufficient health insurance coverage that we just talked about. And then, so NAMI is inviting the Department of Labor, and they're trying to dismiss some myth there. But as a system, we need to look into that as well. Then we have immigration status. So some of your Asian American clients may not seek further help, right? Because they are afraid of jeopardizing their immigration status or citizenship application process, right? So that is about immigration. Then sometimes, especially first generation immigrants, they would consider traditional or non-Western medicine their primary treatment rather than a complementary treatment as we see it. So this can result in delaying or refraining from seeking mental health care. And definitely we want to encourage people to take ownership, right, for their recovery process. But sometimes it is that what we talk about, asking questions and getting to know more about them, and to provide this consultation, right, partnership, instead of prescribing something to you. So that through that, the clinician can help to empower them to maybe advocate for themselves, to effect changes to dismantle the systemic barriers.
Wow. Well, in this short period of time, you gave us so much, not only in terms of what the barriers are, both systemic as well as cultural, but you gave ways that we can actually intervene, or ways that we can mitigate and bridge that gap between our interaction and be able to engage individuals more easily. Thank you so much, Maggie, for actually sharing. Just any last words, parting words for anyone who is listening in?
Yes, I do want to mention, I thank all the clinicians and frontline workers who are listening to this. I want to mention that respect, we talk a lot about it, really is a common mutual feeling that can look very similar to how you are feeling it, right? So I sometimes people say that Asian may prefer not looking at you to show respect or being looked at in the eyes. But I say that there is a lot of variety there again. So ask questions and don't and feel empowered and confident that you can do something to help them. And if you have noticed that there has been barriers that you yourself would not be able to cross, then it may be time to refer. Right. So, and there are many pathways to healing, and you are to empower the clients to know that the journey of recovery is individual to them, right? To empower them to think that way, and then to also to refer them to a non-judgmental community like NAMI. We have support groups. It's all free. All NAMI services are for free. To refer them there so that they can find. We see so many times people come in, they use up our box of tissues, right? Not talking, but using our tissue, they cry. But then by the 3rd month, they come, they started sharing, then they learn as well, right? From each other. Oh, wow, there is treatment out there, and treatment works, right? And they're not alone, there is hope. So these are the key messages that we can give to our clients. And in a adage that from Lao Tzu, right? So it's called a journey of 1,000 miles begin with a single step, right? So we can use that to really to encourage our clients to reach out to it, and their mental health matters, and there is always hope.
Wow, what a powerful way of actually pulling this together. Thank you so much, Maggie. Wow.
So glad that this was just amazing. Let me just tell you, just really amazing. Next month, which will come soon enough, we're going to have Siobhan Davis, a victims witness advocate, talking about engaging victims of color, engaging victims of crime who are people of color to receive mental health services. If you haven't done so already, sign up for next month. Here's a great number to call if you haven't tried it before, 1-866-202-HELP or 1-866-202-4357, or text NJ Hope to 51684. We're open 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. No insurance is required. Anonymous phone calls 14 years older plus multilingual services are available. June is Pride Month, and we take pride in our mental health. So very, very, very glad. Hopefully we'll see you next month.